What's up, family? Last time we had this conversation, I gave you 5 reasons why I think the Bible reads as fan fiction. Today, I'm going to give you another 5 reasons. Now, before I do, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this so this conversation can go further. Okay, so last time we did this, I was in a very free flowing mood, and so I decided not to interrupt that. So I'm going to do this the same way I did the first part of this video, which means instead of using my teleprompter, I'm just going to use my phone. I'm just going to go off my little cheap phone and we're going to talk. And then I got Morpheus behind me, so he's going to back me up. So let's start with a brief recap of the first 5 things that we identified as reasons why the Bible might exist or might read as fan fiction, why I consider it fan fiction. I'm not saying you have to consider it as fan fiction, but when I read through it, when I look at it, when I go through, and I'm not even just talking about the literature itself, I'm talking about when we go through the process of how the Bible came to be, how the stories come into existence. This is absolutely fan fiction. Okay, so are y'all ready? So one of the first things that I called out is that it was built on pre-existing worlds. We talked about that last time, so I won't spend a lot of time here. I'm just going to hit it. The Genesis flood story mirrors the epic of Gilgamesh. The creation story borrows imagery from the Babylonia Enuma Elish. This information is out there. But then the second one that I highlighted was that there are multiple authors with competing canons. Just as different fan writers post conflicting continuities online, biblical books were written by various authors and redactors over centuries, and the stories, they keep changing. And sometimes when they change, sometimes even when they're contradictory, they don't take those stories out. They don't even do a good job of retconning, man. All right, so let's continue. And then the third one that I gave y'all were that there were original characters that are inserted into older lore. So the New Testament, Jesus is a newer character who is then inserted into older lore. All of a sudden, Jesus is all of these angels that appeared up. You can just pick an angel in the Old Testament and say, "Oh yeah, that was Jesus." All of a sudden, you get to change what the Hebraic word Elohim means. And so in the beginning, where it says the man will be like us gets to become, oh no, that's God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Those taking those newer characters who did not exist at the time this story was developed and just plug them in there like they've been there the whole time. You see that? All right. Then number 4, we hit that it was power fantasy and wish fulfillment, and you see a lot of that clearly in the Old Testament. And then by the time you get back to the end of the New Testament, you see a lot of that. It's this idea of imagining ordinary people wielding cosmic power or divine favor. The Bible reflects ancient human desires for agency, control, and belonging, imagining tribes, kings, or individuals as chosen by cosmic forces. And this is a slippery slope that I wish we as humanity would get off of, always needing someone to be better than everybody else in order to do something, instead of recognizing that we don't it is not something outside of us that makes us human. It is not something outside of us that makes us capable. Like the need to appeal to some cosmic authority is probably the greatest show of insecurity in mass. I don't know about you, but I don't need that. I think I kind of went on that rabbit trail in the first video where we talked about, like, man, humanity, we've already made that leap where we realize that the power is in us, has been in us this whole time. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, no, man, what once was a mystery is now a mirror of our own humanity. Damn, that's good. Y'all, I don't mean to be preaching, but y'all know when I'm not just going, I'm just going to flow. So like, no, we now realize that the things we treated as mysteries, no, these are mirrors to our own humanity. That's how you can see the fan fiction of the Bible, because we can't stop writing the same stories over and over again, because these mysteries are nothing but mirrors to our own humanity. Just like Poe in Kung Fu Panda, when he finds the secret scroll, and the secret scroll, the mystery, is simply a mirror that this is you. You're capable of these things. All right, I'm not going to preach. Jalapeno. All right, and then the last one that I hit in our first video, and this is one hell of an introduction, right? The last one that I hit in our first video was moral and theological retcons. So when a story doesn't make sense, fan fiction fixes it. Later biblical writers do the same. The prophets explain disasters as punishment for disobedience. Paul reinterprets Hebrew laws to fit his Gentile mission, and the later Gospels patch inconsistencies in earlier ones. Happens over and over again. But, and it doesn't just stop there. Like, this thing is like turtles all the way down, because once the progenitors of this movement kind of make this thing like it's almost like law at this moment. Like, no, you got to just keep fanficting the hell out of this thing, because this is what preachers do. I mean, when you take who Americans look at Jesus as, this is not the same person that's in the Bible. Like a popular thing that people say about Jesus, which is absolutely a retcon, is that Jesus, he was this anti-Roman figure. What scripture shows you Jesus being an anti-Roman figure? No, no, where are you getting that from? Jesus didn't speak against the Romans. He spoke against the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin, the Jews. The Gospels are not anti-Roman books. The Romans are treated almost as passive, as not involved, non-interventionist, not wanting to get involved, respecting of the culture, bound to the decision that the Jews made. So where are people getting this anti-Roman revolutionary from? What revolutionary act did Jesus do? Please help me understand. See, no, that is retconning. It's like there's this story of Jesus, and he calls a woman a dog. And instead of looking at the story as it is, within the context of the story as it's being told, Christians find a way to retcon that story and say, no, this was secretly a test. It's retconning. All right, so those were the 5 that we went through in the first video. So today, I want to give you 5 more, because when I originally sat down to do this video, I had 10, but I got in such a flow that we spent like 30 minutes on 5. Let's see if we can knock these next 5 out a little quicker. So the one that I want to pick up on today is the first one. There are expanded universe crossovers. Okay, so let's look at my notes here. The Bible creates a sprawling shared universe, blending cosmic battles, love stories, genealogies, poetry, law codes, and political intrigue, similar to modern franchises that grow beyond their original scope. It's like you start off writing an epic story about an epic character whose name is Tony Stark. And then all of a sudden, you get these other people who are involved. And now it can't just be the Tony Stark show. It can't just be Iron Man. Now it has to be the Avengers. But then we got to tell this other story. So we got to bring in the Guardians of the Galaxy. Let's call them the 12 Apostles. You know what I'm saying? So it's this expanded universe. And it's no different than, like, we haven't stopped building fiction in this manner. So for an example, you can take stuff like the book of Songs, the book of Proverbs, the book of Leviticus, the book of Daniel, and the book of Acts. These books coexist in one canon, though they're telling completely different types of stories. Psalms is just songs. Proverbs are just stories of wisdom, like maxims of wisdoms. Leviticus is law. Daniel is apocalyptic fantasy, and Acts is historical fiction. But someone decides to, hey, let's patchwork all of this into one thing and make it seem like it's univocal. This is no different than what we do with comics, where you have several different people writing competing, often contradicting, sometimes complementary stories about the same exact comic character, and different hodgepodges of characters around that character. And then you decide, we want to make a movie, so we're going to mix and match all of those different stories to make one new story. The only problem is these people didn't do a good job of making it one story. Well, and a part of that is because it was never meant to be publicly consumed. Like that was a big problem. Like, that's when the people say, like, well, how did Christianity remain true for so long? And I'm like, well, if you do the research, if you actually study the history, not the propaganda, it's very clear how Christianity remained in power so long, because the Dark Ages happened, and they were kind of responsible for it. And during this entire time, again, the power of Christianity is spreading by testimony and murder. Okay? No one got to question the book, you know? So you're literally talking about for nearly 1800 years where no one who became a Christian through conversion by reading the book. You had to be a believer long before you could ever even possibly qualify to read the book. To read the book required being a part of the upper echelon of people who had already committed themselves to the indoctrination. This is not rocket science. It's not a mystery of how these things happen. All right, so you also have angels from Daniel who show up centuries later in Revelation, connecting timelines. In short, the Bible is an ancient cinematic universe from original stories to cosmic finales. And again, as an author who writes epic stories, if you haven't checked out Memphis, The Last Supper, do so. I'm going to tell you there's some sex in it, there's some fucking in it. So I write my books for adults. All right, but no, it's the problem becomes here is that then none of the characters in these stories actually become fully fleshed out, which is actually one of the things that's made it most difficult for anthropologists and for people trying to study the historicity of the Bible is that you don't have fully fleshed out characters. These characters are caricatures of a moment. They're not real people. Like that was one of the things that was even when I was a young believer, it was hard for me to come to terms with, well, how are the 12 apostles or 12 disciples real people, but there's nothing in this that actually reads to their lives. They're all written as like side characters. They're all written as supporting cast, not like real people. That's not typically how history reads. Okay, I'm just saying. I'm just saying it's very evident. You know, who are these people that you went all out your way to give us their names? Didymus, who's called the twin. You gives us all of these things and can't tell us a lick of things else about them. But see, that's also like the book of Exodus, where you have Moses raised in the house of Pharaoh as the son of Pharaoh, and yet he does not know his adopted daddy's name. Come on now. He's raised in Egypt, but yet he does not know the terrain in a way where he can imbue it into the text. No, this is fan fiction. Okay. Yep. Yep. All right. So did I drive that one home? Okay. So there's a lot of expanded universe crossovers. Well, the New Testament is even filled with a lot of those crossovers where you get to see Moses and Elijah show up who had nothing to do with each other in the Old Testament. Never met each other, never saw each other. Two different paradigms, two different eras, two different types of prophets, right? Like two different types of prophets. People like the types of prophets that Elisha and them do. Moses can only do things like in the last damn minute. You know what I'm saying? Like he wasn't that type of prophet. He can only do it when God told him to. Elisha could just make shit happen. But you see these recurring types of crossovers where all of a sudden to kind of reinforce this ideology that these characters who are long dead. I mean, in the Old Testament, you have one of the angels, and I believe fighting over the one of the fallen angels fighting over the bones of Moses, and yet we see Moses show up in the New Testament for the transfiguration. Okay, help me understand what's going on. All right, but that's expanded universe crossovers. But let's talk about this next one. Fan service for a devoted audience. You know, this is very clear. Biblical writers tailored content for their communities. Like it's very clear. Like one of those moments that just kind of went off like a light bulb in my head is that if the Bible was God's instruction for all of humanity, why is he only focused on one pocket of humanity? Why is he so restricted to what humanity actually looks like? Why is he so ignorant of the planet? Why is he so ignorant of the continents? Why does he not imbue any higher knowledge that was available than the knowledge that was already currently available to the people who would have been in this little pocket place that he tended to hyper focus on? In other words, the information in the Bible in no way rises to be above what the people in that time would have known. It doesn't expand beyond that, making that God so hyper fixated on them that he couldn't possibly be a God who knows anything about the whole of humanity, the whole of the earth, let alone the whole of the universe. Mhm. Because this fan fiction is hyper focused on these particular characters. This is character development, story development, not historical record keeping. Mm-mm. Nope. Um, So the biblical writers tailored content for their communities. These are tribal victories, moral vindications, divine favoritism, just as fan fiction writers write to please, affirm, or inspire a niche audience seeking recognition within a shared story world. Now, honestly, there's a part of me right now, somewhat as a futurist and somewhat as, like a cultural community architect, that want to talk about some power in that, because the stories that we share are really, really powerful. That's why some of these things persist for so long. But that's literally what you're seeing here. What I'm trying to do is to highlight the mechanics of the mystery so that we can begin to understand these things, right? But ultimately, these are inspiring a niche audience who are seeking recognition within a shared story world. So Deuteronomy glorifies Israel's covenant identity as you are a chosen people. Again, that idea of having this cosmic endorsement, this divine endorsement, and see that, like, that's the high that many evangelical, many missional, many charismatic churches are running off of, is that I was chosen to do this. There's something that is bigger than everybody else that chose me, and therefore that makes me better than everybody else. That makes me more important than everybody else. But see, here's the difference between me and all of them. I don't need to be chosen. I chose myself. Y'all don't want to talk to me. But no, so you see these where the idea, okay, who are the authors? We could assume that they are Israelites, or the people who are trying to be a part of this identity of Israelites. Who is the audience? Well, the audience are these people who are trying to formalize themselves as Israelites. And then who are the chosen people? Well, the chosen people are these people who are trying to be Israelites, or formalizing themselves as Israelites. Okay, do you see the problem here? So, like, Israelites are writing to Israelites, telling Israelites that you are chosen by a higher purpose. This is simply fan service for a devoted audience. I don't understand why we don't, like, it's just we still do this with patriotism today, you know. Like, we say stuff in America like, you know, like, we should do this because we're American. That's the same thing. It's because we're American that we should do this. How about because we're human? Was that not an option? Is that not a thing? Can we just do these things because we're human? Y'all don't. It's that fan fiction to support a niche audience. You are chosen. It is identity cohesion. This is not divine revelation. Divine revelation would absolutely have to reveal something, and there's nothing revealed here. This is ego stroking. Okay. Okay. So, like, really, really, what's so crazy here is that the world has become drunk on somebody else's self masturbation. Like, I think self masturbation is the only type of masturbation, but you get the point. We're getting drunk off of somebody else's self stimulation. This is why, like, even me, again, as an African American, it hit me one day because I was all out, I was Black Power, Black Proud type of thing, and it hit me one day like, damn, why am I so focused on Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? They ain't my damn ancestors. Like, why would I give a damn about them? Why have I got so caught up in somebody else's circle jerk that my cultural and family isn't even appreciated in? What the fuck am I doing? You know what I'm saying? I was like, no, let the Jews have this. These they family. Let them have their family stuff. I'm gonna get my own family stuff. All right, so no, it doesn't actually reveal anything. It's just ego stroking. You're a chosen people. You're great. And to be fair, because I am being a little tongue in cheek, yes. But to be fair, it's not just ego stroking. There is some correction, and hey, y'all need to get better. Y'all need to go back to the old ways. Y'all need to remember how Big Mama and them used to do it. There's all of that stuff. But in other words, for me, I now realize, man, something that Christians can't be honest enough to realize is that this ain't my story. This is not the story of humanity. This is not the story of a global humanity. There's no part of this story. There are no part of these stories that exist in the Bible that are written from the perspective of someone who has a global view on what is going on in the world, let alone a universal understanding. You know, that's when people ask me stuff like, well, if you don't believe in the Bible anymore, what do you believe about the universe? What the fuck is in the Bible that told me anything about the universe that was accurate? No, I don't know any Christian who is genuinely a Christian because they were convinced because the Bible said something about the universe. That is not the game that Christianity plays in. Christianity does not show up at science fairs every year showing people all the ways that the Bible shows the universe and how stable and solid it is and the mastery of the design. No, Christianity appeals to the emotions. Churches are not growing through science fairs. They're not growing through explorations of the universe. They're growing by appealing to poor people whose lives are broken and presenting Jesus as the perpetual healer while also serving him up as the perpetual punisher. hmm Yeah, we're going to talk. We're going to talk. So the point is, you can tell it's fan fiction because it's written to a fan base. There's no part of the Bible that comes outside of the universe of the fan fiction. Mm. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like Anakin never talks about New York. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It never comes out of the universe of the fan fiction. It's stuck there. Okay. Revelation promises persecuted Christians revenge, fantasies, and eternal glory. In short, it's political fan service, narrative sugar for believers who endured hardship. Like when you read it and you actually study it and you actually figure out how it came to be, it becomes very clear. I mean, even when you explore the convenings of the early church fathers, it was very clear that they understood that none of this needed to be historical for them. That wasn't a requirement. When they were canonizing scripture, whether this is accurate was not one of the requirements. Whether this is absolutely true was not one of the requirements. It's whether this serves the agenda of what we're trying to pull together now. And so again, that's why you see that very clearly, that when you read the Bible, it is written every story. Break up that univocal ideology and separate these things out into how they actually exist, and it becomes very clear. No, this is fan service for a very devoted niche audience. All right, so let's hit this next one. I think I'm doing good on time. There's a lot of author self-insertion and propaganda. All right. So many fanfics blur lines between the author and the hero. Prophets, apostles, and chroniclers often write themselves or their ideology into the text, casting their faction as the hero and their enemies as the villains. This is the ultimate self-insert. And so great examples here is two of my favorite books in the Old Testament are Ezra and Nehemiah. Like as a humanist, as a secularist, when it comes to community building, I will still use stuff from Nehemiah because it's such an excellent story in that regard. But what is very clear is that Ezra and Nehemiah write themselves into the restoration story as national saviors. So remember that thing. It's like circle jerking, man. Like these are a bunch of self-congratulatory, egotistical people saying, "Hey, here's how I saved this broken kingdom that never got saved." And that's how Jesus becomes an archetype that sits in this same type of broken fan fiction world, because he's that same type of savior. Here's how I saved the whole world without actually saving the world. Like, that's the whole story of the Bible. The story that Christians try to sell you is that Jesus saved everybody, yet you still need to get saved, and yet there will be some people who are not saved at the end. So how is everybody saved, but yet there's a hell? How is everybody saved, and yet I need to get saved? Like, when does the salvation take place? If it did not take place when you died, if it did not take place when you resurrected, hell, if it did not take place when your daddy created all this shit, I don't think this particular family, this dynasty, this empire is capable of producing anything that looks anything like salvation. So I'd encourage everybody, you better define salvation for yourself. As a matter of fact, just to kind of as a thumbs up to all the Christians out there, the very first gospel message that was ever preached was preached by the apostle Peter according to the Bible, and that message was save yourselves. So I don't even know where where Christians get this message, this gospel message of Jesus is here to save you. That's not what Peter said. Peter in the book of Acts said, save yourself. This is the first time the gospel message was preached. And it's that according to the Bible. Now it's fan fiction, but according to that story, the fan fiction, according to the fan fiction, when somebody got up and said, save yourselves from this untoward generation, 5,000 people decided to save themselves. Jalapeno. Can I get a hell yeah? All right. I'm just saying, see, I can still make it preach because it's not the story. The story doesn't have any power. It's our humanity. The mysteries are a mirror of our own selves. Okay. I hope this is good, y'all. I hope this is good. Paul's letters turns his personal theological struggles into cosmic truths. And this is, self-insert meets manifesto. Like, oh, damn. I was a victim of this one. I want to call myself a victim. I don't really like that language. But no, I was hook, line, and sinker in this. I became Paul in many types of ways. I identified with Paul. Paul used his personal life to create a type of synchronicity, if you will, with the universe or with the divine, with God. So everything that was happening in his life was a battle between heaven and hell. And I began to treat my life like that. Like Paul was on it. And I was like, yeah, so if bad things happen to me, it must be because God is using me to do something else. I got that stuff from Paul. If there is a thorn in my flesh, God's grace is sufficient for me. And perhaps I have this thorn so that somebody else can get some glory or get some assistance. And so that God can get some glory because God, or at least Jesus, is that type of jackass where according to the New Testament, according to the Gospels, these stories that y'all say are so fucking beautifully brilliant, according to the Gospels, God will have somebody be blind for no other reason than just for years later his son can come and heal him. What type of bullshit is this? The people asked him, for what reason was this man born blind? Is it because of his own sin or his family sin? And Jesus said, hey, for all you know, it's so that God could get the glory right now. What type of player shit is that? That's cold-blooded, man. I don't want to be in that circle. What is wrong with y'all? But mind you, this is the same God that said, hey, oh, Abraham, you really about this life? Mhm. You really committed to your boy? All right, go kill your first son. Like, that's a non-starter. There's no, I'm just playing. After that, no, what the? But and that's literally how that's written. God asks Abraham to do it. Abraham gets ready to do it. And then the angel comes and says, nah, God don't really want you to do it. And for all we know, the angel was lying because God didn't come back and say, I'm just saying. But see, that's what you can do when it's fan fiction. And I think one of the biggest proofs that the Bible is fan fiction is what preachers do to it. I remind people, like, preachers are not theologians. Theologians don't lead the church. Theological institutions have nothing to do with the modern church. They are separate institutions, 100%. 100% separate. Preachers, most by far and large, especially when we're talking about modern contemporary preachers, evangelicals, charismatics, urban Pentecostals, hey, they are not theologians. Even many of them that went to Bible college, they are not theologians. They are practitioners. And so for many of them, for what they do, the work is performative and passionate. And if you watch the way they preach scriptures, it's obvious that they're not rooted into any type of historical or critical understanding of the characters that they're preaching about. The characters themselves just become tools for motivation, inspiration, and reflection. No difference than Little Red Riding Hood. Okay. So in short, it's political fan service, narrative sugar for believers who endured hardship. Nope, I already said that part. Nope, it's many prophets weren't just narrating; they were inserting their movement's marketing. You know, like if you read especially the New Testament is obviously marketing something. And what is it? Some people say, well, it's marketing love. Where? Outside of the propaganda, that's not what I see. What it's marketing is a new in group, and drawing a very fine line on where the out group is, you know, and it becomes very clear. I mean, just from the time you switch from the Gospels into the letters, especially when you get into Paul's writing, it becomes very clear that none of these people are even on the same team. I don't know. Well, I do know. I was going to say, I don't know how we convinced ourselves that this is telling one complementary story, but no, I do know because it's the propaganda of Christianity. Christianity was believed before it was received. Damn, that's good. Okay, let's keep rolling. All right, number 9. Because damn, I'm already at 30 minutes. So let's go to number 9 and then number 10. Number 9, which is technically number 4 for this video, that's conflicting timelines and headcanons. For communities, fan communities argue over canon, and so did these early theologians. Conflicting gospels, which are still there. Like they didn't just remove the conflicting gospels. The gospels still conflict. There's conflicting genealogies, and they're still there, right? So, like do you know how many people claim to have read the Bible from beginning to end several times, but do not know that the genealogies are conflicting? So, for me, as a person who's always been somewhat studious, I was in that little talented and gifted club I was in. I like to read and stuff. For me, as a person who's always been studious, I'm like, now, how did you thoroughly read this over and over again, and you missed that those genealogies are not in a line, or you missed that those gospels are not in line? Or you missed that that's not exactly 3 days? Like, how did you do? How did you miss all of this? Yet you read it all. When I was growing up, teachers used to run that little test, and they said, "Make sure y'all read all the instructions before you start." Right? And people are like, "Yeah, yeah, we're gonna read all the instructions." And so then everybody turned the test in at the end. Everybody turned the test in at the end, and half of the class, if not more, fails. Now she asked, did y'all read the instructions before you started? Yes, ma'am. Did you read all of the instructions before you started? Yes, ma'am. That's Christians, are people who are giving the answer that they think other people want to hear while being completely disconnected from the answer themselves. Because what ended up happening, the teacher put at the end of the instructions, please go to the end of the page and read the last line. And the last line says, you do not have to complete this test. Just sign your name and turn it in. you know and so please never forget that the people you're dealing with in life are the same people you went to high school with. Okay, we all got to do better. And so damn, this is just too good. So these conflicting gospels, genealogies, and doctrines, they mirror fandom debates about true versions. Early Christianity's councils function like fan moderators, deciding what counts as canon. you know So some examples here, like I've mentioned, the four gospels disagree on Jesus' last words. They disagree on the resurrection timeline, and they disagree on genealogy. That's 3 strikes, you're out. You know? So again, so you wonder, how does something that conflicting, that contradictory, stay in the Bible for so long, stay in the canon for so long? Because it was never meant to be something that was publicly consumed, addressed, or discussed. You know, this was just going to be the shared myth that the elite used for others. This was never meant to be publicly consumed. And that's when all the oh damn, you know, it's like you have a company that's doing, it's like WeWork. Christianity is like WeWork. Everything looked good until it went public. Okay. Everything looked wonderful. Everything looked exciting. And then it went public. Because then once you go public, you're accountable to more people. Man, y'all, I'm preaching better than y'all responding. Jalapeno. First and Second Samuel versus First Chronicles. They tell different versions of the exact same reigns. In short, ancient fandom wars, sects argued over whose versions was canon long before Marvel fans did. And that's what we're dealing with. And so then number 10, which is number 5 for this video, and that is there are endless sequels and spin-offs. Have y'all seen how many spin-offs these books have had, man? There was the what was the Brigham Young spin-off, the Joseph Smith spin-off, there's the Harry Krishna spin-off, there's the Jim Jones spin-off, the people, there's the David Koresh spinoff. Like, and I'm just talking about the recent spinoffs. This book has been this fan fiction. There's so many spinoffs of this fan fiction till it is ridiculous. From the Talmud and Gnostic Gospels to modern interpretations and Bible fanfics like Paradise Lost and the Chosen, the tradition has never stopped. The fan fiction energy continues, reimagining, defending, or rebelling against the source material. The Talmud expands Jewish canon with commentary and law. The Gnostic Gospels reimagine Jesus as a philosopher or a mystic. And so here's the thing that I want to say. If something needs to be reimagined, that's probably a clue that it was imagined in the first place. Okay. If something needs to be reimagined, that's probably a big clue that it was imagined in the first place. We ain't reimagining if it wasn't pre-imagined. All right. Nobody needs to reimagine Darante because Darante actually exists. When you have to reimagine something, it's because there's something wrong with the imagination of it you had the first time. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. So, and then modern works like Paradise Lost or The Chosen continue the fanfic lineage. The Bible didn't end, it launched an entire literary genre of these divine comedy and trauma sequels. That's ultimately what you're getting. Like, so it's not just that the Bible reads as fan fiction, is that no part of the Bible actually reads as nonfiction. You know, like that's the number one clue that it's fan fiction. It does not follow the parameters of nonfiction. It has an obvious story to tell. It has an obvious hero and an obvious villain. That's propaganda. You understand? That's not truth. That's not history. That's not how historical stories work. That's not how a historical narrative works. Um, One of the biggest clues you have that the Bible isn't even attempting to be a historical narrative book is, again, the many genealogies that it gets wrong. And then you have to understand how many hands, and when I say gets wrong, we're talking about the contradictions. And you have to understand how many trained hands were available working on these things, seeing the contradictions, knowing that they were there, but then in the greater corpus of the work determining like, oh, it doesn't matter, that doesn't match, this doesn't match, doesn't matter. That's like a really good red flag that this was not about historical accuracy. Then that's a really good flag. This isn't about historical accuracy. No, these weren't, contrary to popular belief, these weren't like just sheep peddlers who were putting this stuff together. These are trained scribes, and they're looking at it and they're saying, those genealogies don't add up. That's not a big enough issue to figure out what's going on there, which would then mean, as you can just kind of pay attention, that the genealogies had no sense of importance. They're there for narrative weight, not historical accuracy. You see, that's not a small oversight. That lets us know that the people who are putting this book together, even it is highly likely that they did not put this together as some type of historical body of work, that they understood it as mythic literature for a type of national mythos. Mm-hmm. Just trying to help. Just trying to help. So when you strip away the halos and the hymnals and read this stuff as literature, the Bible behaves exactly like the fan fiction of its age. It's a passionate, sprawling, multi-author remix project designed to keep old myths alive under new management, which people are still trying to do today, right? Every rewrite was a way to stay relevant. Every prophecy a new plot line. Every gospel a reboot. And maybe that's what makes it so enduring. Not divine perfection, but human persistence. The Bible is proof that people have always been storytellers, trying to make sense of power, pain, and purpose. It's not the Word of God, it's the work of generations who couldn't stop adding chapters. And that, ironically, may be the most human thing about it. That's what I like for people to see. I don't need to see the divinity in anything because I can see the humanity in all of it. And that's the beauty in it. That's the power of it, is what we learn about ourselves, what we learn about each other, what we learn about the world that we live in. But in that regard, the Bible is not special. All fan fiction does the same thing. We learn the same things when watching the transition of Anakin to Darth Vader. We watch the same thing when we watch Scar betray Mufasa, or we listen to Mufasa talk to Simba, "You deliberately disobeyed me." Like we all get these things. That's why we tell the stories. But the thing that we must remember is that we are not just the storytellers, we are also the meaning makers. That is who we are. So, I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with me today. Thank you for hanging out with me. It feels good to be back in front of you, to be back actually in front of the camera. I love y'all so much. We have a lot of exciting things coming out from the channel and from the community. So make sure you stick around for it all. Also, this week, tomorrow is Giving Tuesday for Bridge City Global. So if you're a part of the Bridge City community and you want to support, hey, listen, get in one of the links and find a way to support. And then I think we're giving out free gifts. We're giving out gifts for everybody who gives at a certain level. Stay tuned for that information and all that jazz. I love y'all so much. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with anyone who needs some conversation like this in their life. And last but not least, support us in any way you can. And until next time, keep rising.